My name is Jacob Stoops.
And I'm Jeff Luella.
And you're listening to the Page 2 podcast.
This is our podcast about the people of the SEO industry.
We chronicle the real-life stories, experiences, challenges, and advice from some of the most amazing people in the business. In this week's episode, the Season 3 finale, we talk with Azeem Ahmad. You know him as Azeem Digital, award-winning digital marketer, international conference speaker, diversity advocate, and host of the Azeem Digital Asks Digital Marketing Podcast. Azeem shares how he began as an aspiring sports journalist, and when that didn't work out, he shares how he landed his first SEO gig. He discusses his time at multiple agencies, his transition to in-house SEO roles, and the different challenges each type of role presents. We also get into salary transparency, disparities in salary, knowing your value, and we share our experiences and advice for negotiating the salary you want. We also cover off on why he decided to start a podcast and how he has used his podcast to build his personal brand. For our core topic, there's no better way to end the season than by digging into diversity and inclusion. We talk about Azeem's article from February entitled Diversity, Inclusion, and Marketing in 2021, Why Has Nothing Changed? We discuss the current state of diversity and inclusion in SEO. Azeem shares his experiences. We discuss what areas we believe still are not where they need to be and what we can all do to improve diversity and inclusion in our industry. Lastly, we take our final round of Twitter questions of the week and award an entire box of Page 2 podcast swag. So get your popcorn ready as we tell Azeem's SEO story and have another great roundtable discussion. Hey everybody, this is Jacob Stoops, and we are back for episode 75, the season 3 finale, the last episode we are going to be doing this season before Jeff and I go on a little bit of a hiatus for this summer before season 4. If you don't know me, I'm Jacob Stoops, SEO director at Search Discovery. I'm joined, of course, by the aforementioned Jeff Luella, senior technical SEO at the Wirecutter, a division of the New York Times. Jeff, how's it going?
It's going great. Hey, howdy, hey, everybody.
Hey, howdy, hey. And Jeff, I'm glad to hear your voice because all throughout the week, I was a little worried that Jeff had died. I could not get a hold of Jeff to save my life. Jeff is a busy man.
You know, I bought myself a Raspberry Pi 4, which is the newer one, and I loaded all Python on it, and I'm trying to create a scraping device that is separate from my computer. And learn Python at the same time. So I am going in there, and then yesterday was Tech SEO Boost, so I spent a lot of listening there, especially in the Python section of things. So one day I might be a Pythonista or Isto. I don't know how it goes there for the mail side of things, but no, I just need enough to know how to scrape a few things and run some tasks. And I've been using kind of Node.js and JavaScript stuff. And I think it's time for me to jump on the Python bandwagon. That is a
fitting way, I feel like, to end this season. Jeff learns Python and eats Raspberry Pi.
Pi 4.
Pi 4. All right, so we've got an amazing show today. We have an amazing guest, and he is an award-winning digital marketer, international conference speaker, diversity advocate. We're going to get deep into that, and host of his own podcast, the Azeem Digital Ask Digital Marketing Podcast. So we're going to go ahead and bring him on, Mr. Azeem Ahmad. Welcome to the show.
How's it going, guys?
Going great.
It's going great.
Get a round of applause. Love that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's going great.
I think the next season we might have some sound effects, I think.
Yes, we'll have the polite golf clap sound effect. I could probably do that now, but I don't have an actual radio board in front of me. So this isn't like a true radio station or anything like that. It's all done post-production. Any sound is done post-production.
Keeping up to Azeem's name, you can do that all digitally now. You don't need a board.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. Did you hear me say things like post-production? Doesn't that make us sound like we're really professional? Post-production and editing sounds like we've got a legit operation here. When really it's just held together by glue and duct tape, to be quite honest. Azeem, we're really happy to have you on. No pressure to carry us through the finale. This is our 25th episode of the season, our 75th episode overall. I always have said the past couple of seasons, it's been, you start the season, we typically start in the fall, and it feels very, very invigorating. And then this is going to be complete transparency. By the end of the season, when you've done a huge batch of episodes, quite honestly, it's a little tiring and exhausting. And that is just the reality of running a podcast. Doesn't mean I want to stop running a podcast, but damn it. I think after this episode, it is a good time to take a break. But we are going to bring an amazing episode today. So we're going to talk to Azeem about his background, his story, and I'm going to do what we never do. I'm going to set up the whole episode so people know what's coming. It only took us 75 episodes to figure out how to announce the format at the beginning of the episode. So we're going to tell Azeem's story, and then for our core topic, and we don't know if core topics are going to stay or go next season. We'll see. But we're going to talk about probably the best way, in my opinion, to end the season by talking about diversity and inclusion. That's been a huge point of emphasis, for us throughout the season, especially with the types of things we've been promoting. It's been a huge deal for us for a long time, and who better to dig into it with than Azeem? And then, of course, we're going to end the episode like we end every episode with Twitter questions of the week, and we are going to award a huge box of swag. And we got an interesting comment that I think there was a language or an interesting question. There was certainly a language barrier. Did you guys know that in Australia, swag really is like a little tent? Because I didn't know that. I thought it was. I didn't know that
either.
Yeah, so I got like a side message from one of the question answerers that said, like, I feel like my joke fell flat a little bit. Maybe it was lost in translation. And it definitely was, but it was the impetus for us. So in the US, swag means stuff or shit we all get, right? It's typically associated with merchandise at events or things like that. And we've been giving out a lot of swag this season. And today, because somebody made a swag/tent joke, which is funny, we're going to give away an entire box full of swag. So that's going to be hoodie, t-shirt, coasters, masks, stickers, everything, basically everything we have. Whoever wins the question is going to get all of our available merchandise as a way. I think
we need like signed autographed photos of us, like our headshots.
Yeah. Yes.
We're celebrities.
That'll be next
Black
season.
And white.
That will be next season. All right. So Azeem, you've been waiting patiently. We want to do just a couple of quick things, and then we're going to dive into your story. We appreciate you kind of hanging out there with us. So of course, every episode we talk about Hamlet's company, Rank Sense. So if you've listened to the podcast for any length of time, you'll know that Hamlet Batista was a guest on our podcast earlier this season and sadly passed away. Due to COVID, it still kind of really hurts to talk about it. It's still kind of not, it's almost like, it's hard to believe. It's only been 4 months, which it seems like forever ago, but it's not that long ago. He's created an amazing company. He left an amazing legacy, with the way that he, spearheaded the Python movement within the SEO industry. We do want to do our best to make sure that the people left behind, his family, there was a GoFundMe. It's probably still still running that generated a lot of money for his family. There's no way to fill the void that is left behind, but all we can do is do our best to support those who are left behind. So I will point to the GoFundMe one last time. You can search Hamlet Batista, GoFundMe, and you'll get the link. And then, of course, we've talked a lot about his amazing platform, RankSense. It's a meta CMS, which basically allows you to get through the biggest problem in SEO, in my opinion, when it comes to tactical stuff, and that's implementation, especially on the agency side. It allows you to get things implemented a lot faster. And then, of course, United Search, we won't do the entire live read, but, we've been, really behind what they're doing. They're doing some amazing things for diversity and inclusion. It's really been something that we care deeply about, which is why you will see, as long as we're running the podcast, balance with the types of guests that we are bringing on. It won't just be one type. We want to talk to people from all walks of life, all voices. We want to give everybody a platform to tell their story and share their thoughts. And that is exactly what United Search is doing. They are giving through their program, people that want to get into public speaking, who are part of an underrepresented group. Your BIPOC, your LGBTQIA plus, over 55, any women especially, anybody that's part of an underrepresented group. They're giving an opportunity to either be a mentee or a mentor to be able to get mentorship to help them break into the speaking community, within Search. And if you're somebody that has been doing it for a while, you get the opportunity to work with somebody who's looking to break in. So if you want to learn more about United Search, visit unitedsearch.org. And on Twitter, it's actually backwards, which sometimes confuses me. It's search_United.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Every time I read the live read this season, it always got me. It always got me there at the end. I almost flubbed it up many times, but that'll probably be the last live read there for a little while. We will look for different organizations to sponsor next season. So more to come there. So Azeem, you're now on the hot seat, but you're used to this. You run your own podcast, right? So You're used to the talking. Now here's the part where you carry us through the season finale. And as season finales, we joke around a lot, but there's, I'm just wondering at what point is there a plot twist and Jeff kills me off so he can take over the show or something? There has to be some sort of a plot twist, or we've got to tie up loose ends here.
I'm going to rebrand it to the Page One podcast.
That's right. That's what
I'm an overachiever.
Yeah. Once we get a little bit better at this whole thing, we'll be worthy of the Page One.
Well, now you know you're going to die. The plot twist will be the method of your death.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
It's going to be some mob related death because he's obsessed with the mob.
It's going to be a robots disallow that gives me a heart attack. To bring it back to SEO. So Azeem, tell us about the beginning, right? You've been in digital marketing now for 7 or 8 years. Where did you start? Tell us your story. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thank you very much for having me on. Full disclosure, I've planned my entire week around this. So normally on a weekend, I edit my own podcast. I'm not doing that this weekend. So the feelings you mentioned about having a break this weekend, I'm absolutely going to be doing that. But yeah, a little bit about me. I'm Azeem Ahmad, better known as Azeem Digital, purely because people quite often spell my name wrong and it started to piss me off, basically. People have asked me before if Digital is actually my last name. And I did toy with the idea of changing it, but I'm sure my family would disown me. But yeah, I've been in the industry for about 7 to 8 years now. Started off on the dark side, as you might think, in the world of PPC, and then broadened out very quickly. I started to think. I was very keen, very hungry early on to learn more. And I was lucky enough to start in the industry working with a really, really good line manager, and nothing was too big a question for him. And I really sort of flourished and grew under his leadership. And that got me thinking, look, I don't want to be a PPC guy forever, because one day Google might just stop running the advertising product, much to the joy of SEOs everywhere. One day they might stop doing that. So I thought I need to diversify, because it's just one part of the wider puzzle, isn't it? So progressively started to branch out into other areas. So social media, display, programmatic, hopped into the world of SEO. I've done, I think, pretty much everything except for TikTok, but I will tick that off the list soon, pun intended.
Can I see some of your dances?
No, absolutely not. I don't have my own TikTok account. I'm far too old for that.
I love it. I was on it back when it was Musically. I don't dance though. Well, actually, there might be some dancing if you deep down in there, but don't look that deep.
You just gotta get a few drinks in him.
Yeah, that's it.
So what did you, like, before you got into digital marketing, what did you want to do with your life?
This is going to sound so boring, so apologies to your listeners in advance, but I always wanted to be a football or soccer journalist. I just loved the idea that people, human beings, actually got paid every weekend to watch a game and then write about it. It was more the watching the game, not the writing about it. Then I jumped into a journalism degree, and I was like, I'm going to make this dream a reality. And very quickly I realized, fuck, there's a lot of work that goes into this. So I quickly had to reframe my goals.
Yeah, you know what? It's really, really funny. This is not the first time we've heard journalism. Not the first time. There is going to be a day when we do an infographic. Maybe when we get to episode 100, we'll look back at all of the guests and we'll total up, what they did before they were SEOs. And I would say journalism would be pretty close to the top of that list. And I often ask myself, what is it about journalism other than it being a dying industry now, as the paper goes to print, right? And they have to, or I'm sorry, the print goes to digital format. So you got less people subscribing. People are now used to the idea of being able to find whatever information they want for free without having to pay for it. Jeff knows better than anybody by now, with working on the New York Times. And not only that, with people that we've interviewed in the past, they, coming out of college, because of all of the economic factors going into it, have found it difficult to find work. So I guess, when you were thinking about this, outside of it requiring a lot of diligence, is that anything that you ran into?
Yeah, so you're going to love this. So my degree, and to your point earlier on, lots of the people that I've spoken to on my podcast have also done journalism degrees, and I never thought that it'd be so many. We should probably bang heads afterwards and be like, how many people has this happened? And the point that you made earlier on, so my degree was different to a traditional journalism degree. It was a major and a minor. So I majored in journalism and did loads of other modules like law, media law, and everything around it. And then I minored in what was then called new media, which what we now know as the web and social media. So I always had that extra bit in the locker. And fast forward, when I left university, I went for a job. I won't bore you with the whole story, but it was a pretty intense interview process. And the second of four stages was me sitting there. Vividly remember this day. It will just stay with me forever. But it was just me sat across the table from what would be my line manager, and she was dressed very formally, and you just know when you just look at this person, like you don't want to say the wrong thing, because her look would have just killed me there and then. She said to me in the second year of my degree, she said, I've noticed here that you switched from print journalism specialty to looking at online journalism, and why did you do that? So my answer to her was, nobody's really buying physical newspapers anymore. People are out and about, and when they're commuting, they're getting it on their phones or on their tablets. Nobody actually buys a physical newspaper before. Her response, of all the responses that I'd pre-programmed in my head that she was going to come back to me with, and I was not prepared for this one. So she had my CV in front of her in her hand. She basically scrunched it up in her hand, threw it at me, and she said, "Don't give me a bullshit answer. Answer that question again, but tell me the truth this time." Immediately, that light blue shirt was soaked, absolutely soaked. I just remember, it felt like I was sat in a tub. I was just soaked. And I was like, that is the truth. I haven't lied. What is she thinking that I was lying about? And I can't remember how I got out of that situation, but I managed to progress to the next round of the interviews. And she said in the feedback, that was purely to put me under pressure and see how I'd cope under pressure. And I was like,
wow.
Because I was like, I've legit told you the truth here.
Holy crap. That's an incredibly aggressive interview style. I wonder how many people she did that to. And, on her part, probably, I'm assuming that's her personality. Sounds like a Devil Wears Prada sort of situation, that kind of boss. But at the same time, if you're doing that to everybody, it's a bit of acting as well going into that, almost like a method acting.
Yeah,
that's never happened to me in an interview.
That's
I would have just got up and left. Yeah.
I needed to drive first, let me tell you. I was like,
yeah. Wow. Never. Yeah. My worst interview, I would say, outside of getting the feeling that they were, people on the other side of the table didn't believe a word I said. And this is early in my SEO career. I would say my most intense one, I had to drive a couple of hours from Columbus to Cleveland to do an 8-hour interview where I literally was just getting probed with questions upon questions. And Jeff, this happened. This was the agency we used to work at together way back in the day. That was how long the interview was for me. I don't know what your experience was, but my interview was pretty intense. It was crazy.
Oh, I'm so good that they just went off of my
sight unseen.
Yeah, exactly.
Sight unseen.
I just pulled up and they were like, "You got the job." So
right. That's how it works. So Azeem, you've moved into an agency. Agency. What was that like? What was your experience working at an agency?
Yeah, really intense, but I absolutely loved it because for me, I learned so much so quickly. And if I could start all over again, I literally wouldn't change that at all. I think in an agency you have to, because you're working with so many different clients of different sizes and in different verticals. So you're kind of forced into that environment of having not only to learn your clients' businesses, verticals, sectors, but also how everything works at the same time. So it was learning two different big strands at the same time. And for me, I was quite keen to learn because I knew that this is the beginning of my career. This is my very first job, and what I do here will really set the foundations for the rest of my career. I never thought then, fast forward so many years down the line, I'd be having my own podcast or I'd be a guest on somebody else's brilliant podcast. But yeah, I knew that if I just worked, got my head down, people would recognize that and see me as someone who's got the potential to go somewhere, because I saw people who were quite senior in the company in the same building, and I thought one day I want to be where they are. So I know that I'm going to have to get my head down and do it. But yeah, brilliant to start an agency. Loved it.
And then eventually you went in-house. You've done in-house a couple of times. What was the impetus for you moving from an agency to go in-house?
So the first time, everything that I've just said about being hungry and wanting to learn, I'm about to just shit all over it now, because I was quite happy where I was. And a recruiter got in touch with me saying, "We've seen your profile, got the perfect job for you, and it's here." And I was like, okay, so here is 50 miles away from home for me, and I am not in a position where I want to relocate just yet. So if I were to move, I would want at least another 5K than what you're offering, because I'll need to travel 50 miles one way and 50 miles the other way. The recruiter was like, that's not a problem. They literally told me everything that I wanted to hear. At the time, I just literally just sucked it all in. I was gone. I was sold. So they said, here's the job. This is what it's about. I was like, right, this sounds interesting. And then fast forward, went through the interview process, and I'd asked for 5K more than the recruiter had put me in for. The recruiter said, look, they're interested. They want to offer you the job. And they'll give you this much, which was slightly more than what I'd asked for. At first, I thought, well, this is like, I can't, there's no way I'm worth this much. But they were like, they really liked what you said, how you presented yourself. And I was like, boom, this is it. So the main motivation, other than diversifying and learning other channels, was the fact that I could take this jump in salary. At the time, in the agency, their salary structure was quite fixed. So no matter what results you achieved, you would only ever achieve like 1, 2, 3K or 4K pay rises. I could get 30,000 euros from a client and turn that into 30 million euros in immense. You'd only ever get 1K, 2K, 4K. So that was the downside of their pay structure. And then somebody comes in saying, well, at the time in an agency, when I got a really good result, it was used as a case study for Google. So they saw that, and that's how I think they got in touch with me. Then I was like, somebody's actually seeing what I'm worth here. At the time, I didn't realize it's a recruiter who's just like thinking of this. Yeah. And then I got sucked in. But if I could put percentages on it, it probably would have been 60% salary and 40% the role. But yeah, I do not look back on that unfavorably at all. I learned so much, met some brilliant people, got some good connections there. And I'm really grateful for the experience, for sure.
You brought up a couple of interesting things that I want to dig into. Well, number one, the agency, the fixed salary structure, it actually reminds me of my wife, who's a teacher, who I've talked about a couple of times on the podcast. And not only that, have either of you guys ever worked at a place where it's unionized? I don't know how big unions are in the UK. Yeah. So when you work for a union, unions at one time were a really great thing in terms of keeping you moving from a compensation, workplace safety, fair treatment, sort of thing. But in this day and age, it's a lot different in terms of the experience. Now, I'm not saying everybody has had this experience, but take my wife as an example. My wife is a stellar teacher. She's got a lot of really amazing experience. When she receives reviews or accolades for her job, she's like a top performer. And the problem is she operates, and she's completely underpaid. All teachers are completely underpaid. And they operate within that tiered model based on years of service, right? So there are times where she gets very frustrated because no matter how far above and beyond she goes, there's no incentive for her to do anything better because she's not going to be compensated, anymore for it. And I think her frustration often comes from when she runs up against people that are on the other side of the equation, where they're doing the bare minimum and making more because they have more years of service or whatever. And it's just kind of against her nature not to be a top performer. But it does become frustrating when she's doing things like grading papers on the weekend to know that, like, I'm not going to see a dime more from this. And it's been like for her a long breakup of sorts. Not that she wants to change professions, but that where she had a really hard time before we had kids, separating work and home. And we've really had a lot of conversations around that. Like, hey, I know you want to grade on the weekend and I know you want to get ahead, but are they going to pay you more money? And is it worth doing that versus spending time with your kids? And the answer is always no. And that's like a complete tangent. I don't know what your guys' expectation or experience is, but when you get into a fixed salary situation, it's demotivating for top performers.
As somebody who's in the middle of middle age, tell your wife not to rock the boat, okay? because I'm on that old side. No, I'm just kidding. As someone who I have a whole family of teachers except me and my dad and my mom, brothers, sister-in-law are all teachers, and I see it like it's crazy. And from an outside view of always being in like corporate America, and especially starting on the internet when it was young, it was kind of like, man, like you have your fixed salaries, you can't get more than that. Like I there's a freedom to being able to like leave anywhere and just go find another job, especially in the agency world where you're kind of doing the same thing everywhere you're at. But I am in an interesting spot in the New York Times because like we do have unions on the, the editor sides and the writer side. There's the New York Writers Unions, but the engineers are now unionizing, and we're in like a weird, well, at least for me, it's weird, right? It's because I've never been in a union, and I wouldn't be part of this union if it happened, but they're like, the demand has been put forth to New York Times right now saying like, accept our union. And so it's interesting to see where it's at. So I enjoy seeing all that, and I get all their points there. I've never been in like seen a developers union, right? So that's something that's new that's happening here. And New York Times, like again, like so it's going to be an extension of the writers union, and it's so that we're not pushing people too hard and really having like those crazy hours that sometimes developers have to do. Developer jobs always a little crazy that way, right? Where it's like something needs to launch and go out, or something did launch bad and now you're working all these late hours. And it's a lot of times you don't get compensated after that fact. So that's where they're trying to get some rules like, hey, if you just had to put a 24-hour workday, you get the next 2 days off or something like that. And I think that's where like the unions come into place and making sure that everything's equal. I mean, we're very huge in the DEI and diversity and all that at the New York Times. And every company meeting, it's a chat, and it's going through, and we have like officers in the company that are focused on that. So I think the unions are a good way there, though I've never been in a union myself. So I'm turning like my view on it. I used to be anti-union. Now I'm like, they got their point. I just, still haven't been in one myself.
So Azeem, one of the other things you said that I picked up on was that you didn't think you were worth a certain salary, right? When they offered you more. Let me ask you, why did you think that? And how did you get kind of over that and realize your self-value? Because that I see is a very common problem in the industry and specific, in my opinion, to both underrepresented groups, women especially, and minorities. And not only that, I've seen a lot of talk recently, and I don't know how true it is because I'm not walking around asking people what their salaries are, about like there's a big wage gap between what SEOs make in the US and digital marketers and what they make in the UK and elsewhere. So how did you eventually get to a point? Well, one, why did you feel like you didn't deserve a certain wage? And how did you get to the point where you I'm assuming you now have a certain amount of confidence, about the wages you're making and asking for?
So great question. So back then, where that thought came from when I was at an agency was that I knew that I could only ever move up, let's say, for argument's sake, 4K. I knew that no matter what I did, the most I would ever make on top would be another 4K. So I only learned that quite late into my tenure at the agency. I was hungry, got my head down, boom, just sort of cracked on. Then as I started to progress and got into like management level roles, I thought, right, okay, now I know I can execute, but can I lead a team to execute the same? And can I motivate a team to execute? When I was working with this manager, who's absolutely brilliant, a lot of super transparent about everything. We used to get together regularly, the usual objectives, yearly objectives, quarterly, yada, yada. I said to him, this is where I want to be. I want to be at this level. If I'm still at this agency in 5 years' time, I want to be at director level. He said, okay, that's fine. This is what you need to do to get to the next step. Clearly outlined, black and white, boom, boom, boom. Fast forward nearly 12 months. We get to our review. And I was like, right, okay, so I feel like I've ticked all of these boxes, everything that you want me to achieve. I feel like I've achieved it. And here are the results that I feel support my claim to move me up. And the conversation was along the lines of, yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you, Azeem. However, there's a hiring kind of pay freeze at the moment. And I was like, oh. So that's fine. I just took that and I thought, okay, cool. It's a tough one to take, but out of my control at the time. So I just cracked on. And then fast forward, and then somebody else in another team who, no disrespect, but like, well, full disrespect, shit at their job, right? Absolutely shit. Like you would see them constantly in the kitchen, making cups of tea, taking half an hour to do it, going for lunch, super late. You'd leave the office and they're panicking, like, I've still got all this to do today. And in your head, you're thinking, well, you shouldn't have spent so long in the kitchen or doing this or whatever. Gets a pay rise. I'm thinking, what? Like, how is this possible? And she was a young white girl at the time, but I didn't look at race or color then or anything else. I just literally thought, well, what's going on there? Like, how does that work? And then when somebody came and said, this is the what's the word, the salary that they can offer you, I was like, whoa, in my head, I live in 4K brackets. You're coming to me and saying, what, 10, 14, 20 more? It's like, no, here in my world, I would need to stay here for 4, 5, 6 years more to get that. So it didn't seem real. Now, fast forward so many years where people are talking about their salaries and their worth, and we can come on to this later on. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. People do feel like they are worth a certain salary. And a couple of guests that I had on my podcast before, we were talking all about salary transparency, and the TLDR version is one of them had announced they'd got a new job on Twitter and said this was their salary, and they've got quite a large following. It was a mix of congratulations to only that much and like lots of comments about, well, you know, that's not a lot, what's going on there? And that's where a lot of debate started, because people felt like this person shouldn't have posted their salary online and was not worth the salary that they had put out. And that's a common theme across the industry. It's just the fact that this particular individual was incredibly transparent about it. I do not have the confidence to come out there, put it on Twitter, certainly for any man and his dog to say, like, I earn X amount per year. But these types of conversations should absolutely be had. And in terms of people feeling like they're not worth enough, I think, yeah, it's absolutely right. I know there are people who are at the same level and role as me who are earning far more than me. But my answer to that is good. Like, and I'll come back to why I think good later on. But yeah, my answer to that is good. That's fine. What they eat doesn't make me shit, right? But I need to have something to go at and to go for. But there are people from marginalized communities or groups who feel the same way, but don't have that level of confidence or the ability to just externalize their feelings and say, look, I should be earning the same amount as Joe Blogs. We do exactly the same work. We get the same results. Sometimes I might even get better results than Joe Blogs, but to know that I'm earning 5, 10, 15% less, I'll never be able to progress to the next job up and get these levels of salaries. I've spoken to people who've looked at job descriptions in the past purely aspirationally and just think, well, I'd never get this job. And that's the kind of mindset that we kind of need to try and get people out of. But I realize it's a long, long process. So back then, literally 4K brackets. Now it's like, well, if you're earning more than me and we're the same level, me personally, good. Just know I'm coming. But anybody else might not have that same level of, it is a little bit brash, to be honest. I'm not going to lie, it is brash, but things that have happened in my life and in the past has made me be as I am now.
The interesting, I'm going to share my approach to salary negotiations, and I don't know if this will surprise anybody. Jeff, I don't know like what your approach has been historically throughout your career. The only job I didn't take the approach that I'm about to share at was search discovery. And that was because I was at like a desperate career crossroads. And not that I was desperate, right? But I was really unhappy where I was. And I saw search discovery as a really great opportunity where, it would have felt like going back home. And it did when I got there. But throughout my career, if you don't know like a lot about me, I grew up pretty poor. And not only that, I had, nobody paid my way through college. I had to pay my own way through college, had to work through college to just make ends meet. Was not very mature, when it came to college, mature in other ways, not college, and didn't take it seriously, racked up my student loans, and eventually found myself not in college and without a profession, without a career, mid-20s, nobody with no money, nothing, no prospects. And, that's when I found SEO, and I've pulled I feel like I've pulled myself up by my bootstraps to make something of myself and to have a profession. Right. And it was really, really unlikely. Anyways, as I started to realize what my worth was, whether I had a degree or not, which I didn't get until much deeper into my career, I didn't actually have a degree. Thank God for SEO for not being an industry that requires, formal college degrees.
Yep.
I realized that when another agency or opportunity is presented to you, it's not like they have like enough transparency to know what you really make. So whatever I was making, when the other agency or place came to me, I always just added on to my salary. If I was making 50K, I said, oh, I'm making 60K. So in order to get me to jump, because I don't want to make a lateral move, I need 65K, or whatever the case may be. I always added a percentage, I always inflated it just a little bit. And I don't know if that was the right or wrong thing to do. It was probably the brash thing to do, but you don't know what you're going to get unless you ask for it. So I've been, in some cases, laughed out of the room. And in other cases, it's been like, no problem. There you go. And each job for me has been a stepping stone. And the only and that's if you're looking at things purely from a monetary standpoint. Of course, there are other things that go into an opportunity. Like with me, full transparency, like when I left startups and I went to search discovery, it wasn't for more money. It was because I was unhappy and I knew search discovery would make me happy. So like there are other things, but when it comes to salary, you never, like, you got to, like, what do they say? Shoot your shot. Shooters got to shoot. So like, you got to shoot your shot sometimes. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, it was interesting. When I first got into, I started off as a developer / designer, and I made really, really, really bad money. But it was also, the internet was kind of new at the time. And I had a friend who ran a car wash, and we had a conversation one time about salary, and he just kind of laughed. He's like, you're supposed to be doing like the future. And he's like, I make 3 times more than you, and I just wash cars. And I was like, well, I'm working my way up to the future. He was funny because he had a computer science degree and was washing cars. I didn't have a degree and started doing computer sciencey stuff, type of stuff. And I loved it. And I didn't care about my salary at that time. Like when I first started, I lived with my parents. Like, I didn't care what I made. Like, I was just like, let's have fun. As long as I have beer money and I can go out and party, that's a good time. And then I, did that for a while. And then I had my first kid. And then I was like, I need to buy a house. And then it was, just shooting my shot. And some companies paid me pretty well. And I was happy. Now, the sad part is there's some like jobs I would love to have that would like emotionally would have, but I'm at a point where it's like, I can't, I tried to go to a small agency before to like do that fun small agency type stuff. And it's just tougher there because their money isn't there. That's there, but it's, in general, like, again, I don't think I'm overpaid or, like anything like that. I think I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And I think the industry is catching up, but I was lucky that early on, I just called some shots where I probably should have made more than I should have made what I was doing. But then I lived up to it and I really rocked it out. And again, I think the industry, and like now I feel like sometimes I'm at I'm at a good spot. I'm not trying to push. I'm not trying to be CEO. Yeah. So it's like, I got a salary that I'm happy with. And as long as I can stay there for the time being, I'm good.
And let me just be clear. I'm not advocating lying, but
but at the same time, like,
It's not like they're pulling your W-2s and take your tax returns.
No, agreed.
Maybe there's a way to do that. If so, nobody's ever called me on that. So it's really more about thinking about like, what do you want to make as a salary?
That's why you lie on Glassdoor reviews. Say like, oh, they paid this junior associate $150,000.
Right.
I'm learning so much here.
I didn't even know that you could do that. Anyways, so Azeem, what made you start your podcast?
Right. This is where we're gonna get deep now. No names mentioned, right? But before this started, and obviously you guys are the exception because you can verify that I had never spoken to you in the past to try and come onto your podcast. But when I was pitching to try and speak at events, I was also trying to pitch for podcasts as well. Completely randomly, out of the blue, where I'm at now, I've been here at my company at the university for 3 years. Somebody reached out to me because they saw me speak at Brighton SEO not long ago. I think somebody from their company came and they're like, oh, we'd love to have you in the podcast. And I was like, oh, never thought that podcast would be an avenue. And I did it. And well, we'll talk about it shortly, but yeah, I did the podcast. And then I thought, okay, so as well as pitching speak at events, like I'd love to do more podcasts. I'd love to be on more podcasts. So I was pitching to people. I wouldn't even call it pitching. I was just reaching out to people, sending them emails saying, look, I'm trying to get out there, do a little bit more speaking. Would you consider having me on your podcast? And it was just a mixture of like nothing to, yeah, I've got so many episodes planned, but I'll get in touch with you further down the line. We can have you on. I even had a couple of yeses, get you on in 8 weeks time, whatever, followed up. Oh, I've got 8 weeks more content now. So the TLDR version again is no fucking body would give me a chance. And I thought, well, fuck this. I'm going to start my own and I'm going to talk to people and I'm going to find people like me who can't get an opportunity to speak, as well as people who are well known in the industry as well. So oversharing now, but look, we're all friends, right? So when I started, I wrote down a list of people who I would love to have on the podcast, like your dream people. So I say candidates, I'm not hiring Jesus, but your dream people, right? And then I just put a pitch form out there and I was like, look, I particularly want to speak to women, people from underrepresented groups, people who have been told no in the past. If you have never spoken in the past and would love to, I want to talk to you. And I don't care if that episode gets 1 listen, 2 listens, 4, 5, whatever. If I have been able to give somebody a shot, put them out there, and they can use that piece of content to say, look, I've done this talk on this podcast. And by the way, this podcast has had X, Y, and Z guests as well as me. That gives them like credibility by default. So the main thing was no fucker would give me a chance. And I was like, well, it's not because I'm not good, because I think I'm okay. I'm not amazing, I'm not the best marketer in the world, but I feel like I have some things that I want to share. And then that was it. And we went into lockdown just over a year ago. And like the first couple of weeks, it was all new for everybody, right? And I was just sitting there, and you guys surely agree, jump on YouTube, you end up in a fucking wormhole. And I started watching like Dude Perfect videos from like 6 years ago. And I'm like, so
how did they get that ping pong ball to get it?
But I'm thinking like, look, I'm not learning here. I'm not growing. And I don't like sitting still. I don't like not doing anything. So I thought like, I don't read enough, so I'm going to read more. And then I thought, well, actually, as a professional, what do I want to improve in? So I've done audio marketing before. I've run Spotify ads, but I don't know the nuts and bolts. So if it was a car, I don't know how it works, or like taking it apart, I don't know that part of it. So I thought, look, I'm just going to start the podcast. But before I started it, I spent a long time in that YouTube wormhole, but actually learning about what it takes to start a podcast, what equipment I'd need, the setup I would need. By the way, if you're watching the video, don't judge the setup, right? But yeah, the setup that I would need, and everything else. So yeah, I just thought, look, I will make this happen, but I'm going to take my time and learn. I'm not just going to jump in 2 feet first and hope for the best. I'm going to make this happen.
Sometimes the first step is just taking the first step. just being brave and being willing to take the risk, right? And it is a risk, right? And you're going to learn along the way, and you're going to get better. I remember, my first episode and first couple of episodes, and full disclosure, I don't know like how you guys are, but I don't like go back very often and listen to old episodes, mostly because I think my voice sounds weird on playback. It sounds normal when it's coming out, and then when I listen to it, I'm like, oh, that's what I really sound like. That's horrible.
Yeah. Another thing I should add is I absolutely fucking hate my own voice, so I will not be listening back to this.
There you go.
That's for sure.
But I enjoy putting content out there. It gives me, I'm a person that like, I always have to have like a creative itch behind the scenes that I'm scratching, whether it's tinkering with the website or just something to keep my mind busy. So, for the last couple of years, it's been podcasting. But there's more room. There's way more room for more podcasts in the industry, for more diverse voices. Totally. And I know that there's a lot of people out there. I did a SEO chat, Twitter chat with Morty Oberstein, and we focused on podcasting. And it seems like there are a lot of people that are just like toying with the idea, but are afraid or are intimidated, don't know the equipment, feeling like they don't have anything to say. And I feel like it's just a situation where if you give somebody enough time, they'll figure that stuff out, but it's really difficult to make the commitment, because it is a commitment. I'm not going to lie. It's not something you just pick up if you're only going to do one episode every 2 months or whatever, right? It is a commitment. You have to be consistent, but you just got to take the leap of faith. It's a little bit of a leap of faith.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's not going to go well first.
Nobody listened.
You're going to learn, right?
Nobody listened. It has been boots on the ground now for us for 2.5, 3 years, and it's still kind of a grind to get exposure and get listens. Now, like luckily we've got like a solid base by now, so it's not like we release an episode and we just watch and there's like, oh, one listen, great. But I'm not going to lie. It's not like we're getting thousands of listens per episode. We're not.
We're not getting overcharged for bandwidth.
No, we're not. We are not at risk. We are not at risk of going over that threshold. So before we get into diversity and inclusion, I have to ask you, you've done a podcast, you've been agency side, you've done freelance, you've been in-house. What is the most I'm trying to think of a great way to ask this, the most gosh, this is what it's really like to be an SEO behind the scenes story. Like, what experience have you had that just most personifies life as an SEO?
God, that's a really good question, to be fair. For me, I would probably say, and I'm going to go with the gosh in the positive sense first. So I'd probably say being in-house, SEO, where I was at before, was like an afterthought, or it was a nice value add, or it was a nice thing to have. And that was the view of it. But where I was working in a multi-channel environment, and every year I was saying look, this is what paid search is going to cost. By the way, since last year, more competitors have come into our space, so we need to pay more. Okay, how can we pay less? Well, okay, there's a channel called SEO, right? We don't have to do anything, right, other than just create really good content for what people are actually looking for and put it out there for them to see. They're like, what? It's that simple? Well, I've really simplified it there, but look, let's have a look at switching some of this investment into creating really good content. Well, what do you mean? So an example would be okay, we're a university, we've just released a brand new course, for example, right? These are the types of keywords that people are looking for. These are informational, these are transactional. And when you're having these types of conversations, people are like, well, okay, so how do we get to number one? And that's the mindset of, how quickly can we get there? And immediately it's PPC, but it's not a long-term way of thinking. So I would go back and say, right, let's look at this type of content right now. Prospective students are thinking about this. So let's create this piece of content and let's put it out there. And this is what these are the search terms, or these are the keywords that people are looking for. Let's monitor that and let's see how it progresses over time. And I need to show you that this is a long-term investment, right? They were like, okay, let's do it. And I demonstrated to them with a specific course that we pulled it like out of the ashes, basically, from, you know, anything below page 1, right? Nobody's going to look over time and increase that organic visibility. But the reason what really solidified that oh gosh moment was this whole project, I involved devs, the web team, specific UX person to look at the user journey, where this piece of content will fit, historic content. It was all literally different pieces of a puzzle. I'd put it all together and I'd put it in front of effectively the C-suite and said, there you go. And there's actual proof. When that graph traditionally, you know, up and to the right, everybody wants, boom, there's your proof. And that for me was like, there you go, there's proof.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when it works. I love showing up and to the right graphs. That's my favorite thing to show. And my favorite, my least favorite thing that most personifies the SEO experience would be things like disallows or de-indexing your site, which I had a client do a few weeks ago. And, all of a sudden taking a national brand down to almost no traffic from an organic perspective. So that happened to me a few weeks ago. It was not pretty. It was a case study, but in the opposite direction. So Jeff, let's talk some diversity and inclusion. That is our core topic today. Let's dive right in.
It's a great topic. So in February, Aziz, you wrote an article entitled Diversity and Inclusion in Marketing in 2021 and Why Nothing Has Changed. For everyone who hasn't read the article, can you give us a synopsis of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was, I think, my third blog post on the subject of DEI. Essentially, the short version is this was written in the same week that a prominent Twitter account in the UK had released a list of, top 10 people to follow. It was entirely white. For reference, in the article, never named who it was, what account, or who the people were. It was totally anonymous because I think it takes away from the point. But essentially, lots of these people on that list started quote tweeting like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I've been named on this list." Really happy, as you would be, right? A day later, I saw an international marketing conference. Like, we're in a lockdown, right? Nobody can go anywhere. We're all behind a computer screen, but it was entirely white. And then I just thought, look, this is not on. And a person of color had rightly gone back at this account and said, where are the black people? Where are the people of color? What's going on? The account apologized, and the people on that list had apologized, but only as a reply to the original tweet. And with my marketing hat on, I know if you quote a tweet, you're sharing the original tweeter's tweet with your entire audience. When you reply, not everybody gets to see that. So I look at that and think, so you're happy to amplify your success. When you make a mistake and you apologize for it, you only replied. And I thought, well, that's not on. And in some people's defense, one of those people on that list had read the blog post and had DM'd me and said, look, I totally didn't see it like that. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Thank you for writing it the way that you did, because I didn't take it personally. And I will do better, and I will pay it forward. And the last part I put on there was that I never shared this until I wrote the blog post, but this was not long after George Floyd was murdered, and I'd got a chance to speak at an event, virtual event, one I'd never spoken at before, but obviously what had happened didn't sit right with me. I was like, look, it's another black man in America who's been murdered, and before the police officer was charged, regardless of whatever the outcome was, I will never change my opinion on that he was murdered regardless. That to the side, that didn't sit right with me. So I thought, look, I would love for not only a female, but a black female to speak at this event. So Areed's really good friend of mine, you've had her on before, Women in Tech SEO speakers list, and jumped onto that, found a specialism, found a black speaker, and I reached out to her via DM and said, look, full disclosure, I'm really sorry to just randomly jump into your DMs, but this is me, here's the opportunity, would you like to take it? And they took it my question to the readers was, should one person of colour have to give up an opportunity at an event they've not spoken at before for another person of colour? That's not right. And why has nothing changed? And I ended it with, at Brighton SEO a few years back, I ran a survey of the industry anonymously where people could share their thoughts. And I'm running that again this year to look at if anything has actually changed 1 year on. Now there's so much of a spotlight on people of colour, people from marginalised backgrounds, not progressing in the industry. I want to be able to see if anything has changed. If it hasn't, why hasn't it? So that's that.
No, it's great. I think as I mentioned earlier on, working for the New York Times, which really does focus a ton on this, and we have tons of meetings all just about DEI, and there's like specialty groups, Slack groups, and we try to do a lot there, and with this podcast, Jake and I really like push to I don't personally get it, but at the same time, I understand it, right? Because it's not that I don't get it. It's like, I don't feel like I was ever raised in like where I felt like superior or anything. And if anything, I felt inferior to everybody. So it wasn't anybody in general. But then as the more I grow, like I moved my family down to Georgia, and we've, my area is actually, my kids' elementary school is like 60% Indian. And it's very interesting in this area here, because I think of Georgia as being like a very old school, racist, deep South. And it is, but the Atlanta area is like the beacon of like hope. And that's the reason why, not sure how familiar you are with politics in America, but we've switched to more of a liberal state, and the backlash has been crazy. So it is very interesting on how everything's going there. But I'm living in a world of it now where I try to help out as much as I can, and I do feel so bad, like, or not bad, but like I feel like this has got to stop, and we need, like, definitely things need to change, and I'm hoping this is the change we need. And the whole George Floyd aspect of things, like, just how many times can this happen? I grew up listening to NWA and grew up listening to Public Enemy and Rage Against the Machine. And I've definitely and I think that's some of the reasons, like, going into this, I'm like, wait, you never knew that there was like all this brutality going on and all this chaos. And it's like, I feel like I grew up in like Ice-T, the old rapper, would told me all these stories, and they weren't like, again, I think things were, embellished a little in rap music, but at the same time, Public Enemy was straight with what they were talking about, and NWA, and there was a lot of those type of groups that really influenced me in the time. But so I kind of got my thoughts from there. But like, how can we work to help solve this problem together as like in an industry? We'll focus it on our industry, but what are some things we can do to make things better for everybody?
How long have you got, guys?
Yeah.
For me, solving things together, there's a really great quote that I read. It's definitely not mine, but basically the difference between diversity and inclusion is being invited to the party and having a great time at the party. Stuff I've mentioned in the past is, like, literally I could go on for hours about this, but I won't. Like, over here in the UK, right, there's once a year, it will trend on Twitter that today is the day that women will effectively work for the rest of the year for free because they're paid this much less than men. Ooh. That's a fact. We're not going to change that, but it trends once a year, right? Nobody really talks about a racial pay gap. So my first question to anybody who's discussing that is, imagine if you're a black man or a black woman seeing stuff like that, because people of colour, we know, are paid less than their white counterparts. So one of the things is release that sort of racial pay gap data. I think companies should go public and say, we at Azeem Digital commit to achieving X percentage of diversity in our workforce by year Y. And currently, this is where we are. And that first year will absolutely hurt. Snap did it last year. I can't remember the exact time, but they sort of released it like very, very subtly and just put it out there because they knew it would hurt, and people found it and started talking about it. I think we should bring wage equity plans to life. Like I've mentioned here, if you're a black woman, people don't really talk about that. It's just men and women, binary, men and women. Nobody, again, I'm pretty sure, will discuss people who identify as non-binary or who are unsure about which gender they are. People don't really talk about that. And then I'm going to steal a quote from Rand Fishkin, who came on my podcast, and I think he stole this from somebody else, so triple stealing. But essentially he said, talent is equally distributed, opportunity is not. So hire people from different backgrounds, but not just at the entry level. This really, like, let's call it what it is, it really pisses me off, because people will hire into the company but at the lowest level, right? And one of the things that I've said before in the past is I think an all-male leadership team will make the correct decision 58% of the time. When you activate diversity, and I don't just mean like different skin color, but I mean age, gender, geography, ethnicity. When you activate all of that, get it into the boardroom, they'll make the correct decision 87% of the time. So in English, it literally makes you more fucking money to have a diverse boardroom. And the last thing that I'll say, because I'll go on forever about this, is don't just hire one person as your DEI guy. Have a second person or a third or a fourth. Even better, have a group of people from marginalized backgrounds as a committee, and to make sure that this work is happening and to hold people to account. I know I said this was the last thing, but this is definitely the last one. The C-suite, their bonuses should directly be linked to all of these initiatives. C-suite should come out and say, we will not pay ourselves a bonus this year until we achieve this, and this.
Yeah.
The benefit of being so bad at the start is that in theory, you can only get better, right? So hire more people of color, link your bonuses to them, and let's progress together. Half of the not half, that's a lot, but a lot of the frustration for me is that I want progress to be faster than it actually is. And these types of injustices and these problems have been going on for a number of years now. And for me, who's quite keen and really wants to get my teeth into this, like I want things to progress faster. So some of that battle is with me, but I need to see more progress. I'm not getting any younger, and I want like the next batch of people coming in to think, right, I can actually do something. I don't want another Azeem to come in and live in 4K brackets and think I'm never going to achieve this. I want the next crop of Azeems or people with different names to come in and think like I can be whatever I want to be if I put my head down and just work. It doesn't matter what color or what gender I am. If I just get my head down and work hard, I can achieve X, Y, and Z. So,
no, I think also being able to expand your pools of people you can choose from, right? So again, I think everybody, and this is probably my naiveness, but it's like everybody wants the best person for the job. But if you're only limiting your pool to certain people, then you're never going to get the diverse aspect of things. So being able to open up your pools of just where you're getting your employees, I think remote has really helped with some of this, where if you were in the middle of, Kentucky, you might not actually have a diverse area to pull from, but the more and more you go into, into like inner cities and things like that, you have that more the diversity side there. But I think, remotes really help that, because now we can work from anywhere and everyone's working from everywhere to be able to pull from that bigger pool. But it's tough. I mean, here at Wirecutter, I mean, I feel that it's like the most diverse company I've been to, but yet there's still like an underlying, push to be even better. Right. And that's a great thing. I kind of, at first I kind of laughed. I was like, this is the most diverse place I've ever been, and yet we can be better. Then I keep on going back to my old jobs that I've been through, and it's, where I've seen, it's all old white guys running the company. As your C-suite, maybe you'll get like a vice president who is like a female, but then you go from there and it's like, but it's still I think Bill Burr has a funny joke on it, but he's just like how women are like rising up, and he's like, listen, you're in the hot tub with me. It's like, it might be my hot tub, but you're in it with me. And it was like a dumb joke. But at the same time, I feel that like, we need to have a bad analogy, but a bigger hot tub with more people in it to be able to pull from.
Jeff, I don't know if you guys noticed me disappear. I feel like that was the plot twist. Jeff was trying to axe me from the show. He somehow hacked my computer, and for the first time in the history of the podcast, we crashed. I crashed literally live during recording, and
everything still went smooth, and
everything went smoothly.
I almost didn't click because when you came back in, it said allow Jacob back into the podcast, and I almost didn't.
Yes.
Welcome back to the Azeem and Jeff
welcome
podcast.
Welcome back to the Jeff Luella show. So I'm not sure kind of, what I might have missed, but gosh, we could talk for forever about this with no end. Yep. And if I'm like really trying to think about the bigger picture, I will say, you had mentioned earlier that you started with a list of people, and while I know that Jeff and I were at the top of that list, what I will say is we did the same thing. You start with a list of people because you got to start somewhere, and then we just, you pun intended, bumped into people organically, and I will say, of course, if you're in SEO Twitter, you kind of see people pop up from time to time, and I saw you pop up from time to time. And if I'm remembering my timeline right, the impetus to reach out to you was when you wrote that article. It was quite a moving article because it's so different from my experience, and I don't know what it's like. I don't know what it's like to be anything other than white and at this point middle-aged. So the experiences that you're going through, that women go through, that the African American community go through, anybody of color, especially as it relates to police, which right now is huge in our country because of the George Floyd verdict. And I live in Columbus, Ohio. We had another a shooting in there are shootings all the time in Columbus, but this one was picked up by the media, and it does keep happening, and I don't know why, and I don't know what to do to solve it. And this is getting bigger than just SEO, and I often think, like, I grew up in Midwestern United States. I can imagine 50 years ago, the racism might have been more noticeable, but I wouldn't say that the racism was noticeable, but I also wouldn't say that it was not there. You grow up, and quite honestly, there was not a lot of diversity in the community that I grew up in. It was 95, 96%, white. So when you grow up like that, it's all you know. You don't know. And it wasn't until I got to college, that I was exposed to different types of people, different, people of color, just things that are foreign to you growing up. So I do think that there might be a segment of people out there that aren't like racist or obliquely evil, but this is all just foreign to their experience. And I know that, like, when I think of the bigger picture, it does seem like there needs to be some sort of a systematic change. But then I think of myself as an individual, and I'm like, what can I as one individual do? And it's ironic that in a country where it's predicated on every vote counting, that you can feel like you don't matter or you can't do anything. And I try to think, what can I do? And I would ask every person to ask themselves the same sorts of questions, especially if you're like me and Jeff, middle-aged and white. You've not experienced the hardships that other people have experienced. And I think number one is show empathy. Empathy is a really easy thing to do, but it's, in my opinion, one of the most difficult human skills to master. Number two, where you can, give people a platform. And if you're thinking about it systematically, I think about generations. I think that this still, if I said, maybe I'm wrong, but if I said, all right, the state of racism, lack of diversity, lack of inclusion in 2021, is it better than it was in 1960, let's say? What would you guys say? That's a question. Generally speaking, maybe better, maybe Azeem, I don't know. You might be the best to answer that one.
Possibly.
Possibly.
I wasn't around in 1960, but just this week, I watched a keynote talk from somebody who basically holds the police to account over here.
Mm-hmm.
And he was around in the 60s and the 70s over here. I'm not sure what it was like over in the States, but he was around here. And some of the things he was saying, people like openly say to him on the street, like horrifically, like racist terms. And then there was a book that he held up saying, like, I've still got this book. And it was of a character who was black-faced. And he was like, this is the type of stuff that we were growing up around in the 60s and 70s. And then he said, this book that I'm holding up, I actually bought it quite recently. So it's still around, but it's just not as overt anymore. So now he's able to walk down the street and not be racially abused. But then this type of literature still exists. And in the sector that I work in, not enough has been done to educate people, as in literally educate them about the injustices faced by black people. A while back, I think it was last year, I listened to a podcast, and the name of the book escapes me, but it was an American photographer who was taking pictures and documenting the story of New York 10, 20 years ago. And it was all about the reclassification of youth. And I was like, well, why would youth be reclassified? And basically what he was saying was, over there, the police were trying to reclassify what it meant to be a youth and an adult and bring the age down so they could disproportionately punish black people with longer sentences.
Wow.
And I was listening to this while I was running, thinking, this is like fucked up. Like, there were two young kids, and I can't remember exactly what the police had them for, but it was literally something super minor. And they got taken away, beaten up, put in prison. Part of this podcast was where they'd gone and spoken to these two individuals. Their entire lives basically has been in prison and shaped by that. And who knows what they could have gone on to achieve. So the short answer for me is potentially it's probably less overt now, but it's still happening.
Of course.
For sure.
Yeah. So the reason I pose that question is because I think in the context of being a parent, and raising my kids, right? And I think of the way I was raised, and then I think of the way my parents were raised and their parents before them. And you hear the different stories like, well, that's the way I was raised, right? I was raised that way, or it was a different time. I think we've all probably heard those types of things from our parents. So like, when I think of myself as an individual, what can I do besides be empathetic, give people a platform, educate myself, keep my eyes open. For me, this is a generational issue. And I don't know, one, we're humans, right? So in all of human history, humans are imperfect and infallible. So I don't know that racism or bias or this type of stuff ever gets completely resolved, ever, because humans are humans. But systematically, when I think about my kids, it's up to me as a parent to raise them in a way that they do not have these sorts of biases, and they do not think this way. These are the kinds of questions my kids ask me all the time. They ask me what happened with George Floyd, and let me tell you, it's not easy to unpack for a 7-year-old that and be completely transparent and honest. And not only that, they ask me all the time, like, why is this person's skin brown? And we have to get into the discussion, or like, why did somebody say this, or why did somebody say that? And very often the discussion we have is quite honestly, and it comes down to like your morals and your values and how you want to raise your kids. And I feel like how you raise your kids will translate into an entire generation normalizing the idea of not being biased against other people based on ethnicity, gender, race, color, all of these things. Yep. But I feel like it's a couple of generations down the road. And it's as simple as saying you should not think any less of somebody because they're Black, because they have a different skin color than you, because their hair is a different color. My brother's gay, because they like boys, you name it. And I think it comes down to normalizing the idea that it's not okay to treat other people that way. And I think that this takes still, even with the amount of focus. And I think maybe the reason that people could as obliquely walk down the street and be less overt in the past is quite honestly like, look at what we all have now. We all have a camera and that has come a long way in the last 10 to 15 years. We can all at any time record things. So maybe if this exists, it may go underground because of that. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but I believe that this is the way to fix this systematically, aside from legislation and passing laws and things like that need to go into place to reform things, and companies taking ownership, is teaching the right values to your kids, to people growing up right now, and normalizing the idea that it's not okay to act this way. Lead by example, right? Set a good example, and hopefully you may not capture all of them, but the hope is that as generations and time passes, the idea that people could treat each other this way becomes less and less and less and less acceptable until it's completely marginalized. This may take 100 years, right? This is a problem that spans the entirety of human existence, but really in the United States and in other countries, hundreds of years. So it doesn't get solved in 1 year or 2 years, but it takes everybody, in my opinion, standing up and taking individual accountability for the types of ideas that they're okay with and that they put in other people, specifically young people's heads. I don't know how you guys, that's my soapbox. I don't know how you all feel about that. And I would ask for maybe, because I know we're running close to time. I want to get to Twitter questions. I would just ask for parting thoughts. We could probably talk about this for many, many hours, but we don't have many, many hours. So I would ask for parting thoughts.
The only thing that I would add to that as not a comeback, because that's offensive, but like as an alternative thought, is that to get any sort of justice, or to even consider getting justice in America as a Black individual, your pain has got to be, like you just said, put on one of these. If that young person had not recorded George Floyd there on the floor, would that man now be in prison? I would probably say no. And equally, to get any form of justice in America as a Black person, you've probably got to have that on camera, and somebody has to be there on camera. As white individuals, my last thoughts on this would be, it's hard, right? Because like you said, and like everything you've just said, completely agree with. So I will never know what it's like to be a white man raising a family and trying to educate a family in this. But what I would say is, my advice to white people is equally, you will never know what it's like to be a person of color. And just let me step aside from it for context, right? I'm not Black, nor am I a female. However, I've got Black members of my family, and also I've got sisters. My mom is a female, and I've got a young niece who's just literally growing up and about to go into the professional world. I want to make sure that this is better for them, right? So that's a sidestep. Come back, right? My last thoughts are on that is, for white people, you've got to get comfortable with pain. And by pain, what I mean is nowhere near the levels of pain that POC endure on a regular basis. So being an ally is not just about being kind or like asking your black or your people of color colleagues like how they're feeling, or just giving a couple of books to a black owned business. It's a start, right? But you've got to endure the pain of losing things, and that involves like losing your privilege as a white person. And you hear that a lot, and the luxury life that's associated with it. Things like if you get offered a pay rise at your workplace, but you've got a black colleague who's doing really well, refuse that pay rise and say, you need to pay Joe Bloggs this money because I know he's being paid less than me. Things like that. Lose your relationships with your white colleagues who acknowledge that maybe some of their behaviors practically reinforce systemic oppression. And then the very last thing is like out there, if you guys happen to be out and you see something happen, you've got to lose your own safety and your own physical well-being. Don't pull out your phone, jump in and help that person. Don't let there be another George Floyd or anybody else who's been wronged and brutally murdered, let's call it what it is, by the police. If you're out there and you see that, don't pull out your phone, go in and help that person. And that involves you taking on some physical pain, because George Floyd had a family who he now can't go back to. Every black person who's been killed will not be able to go back to their family. And you're not particularly you two, but as a white individual, your responsibility there is you've got to get comfortable with that pain. And people band out the word privilege a lot, but for me, that's what it boils down to. Things like refusing a pay rise, continue to pay black-owned businesses. Great, that's a start, but don't think that giving $5 every other Saturday to a black-owned business is going to reduce systemic oppression, or not reduce, eradicate systemic oppression. It's a start, but you've got to get comfortable with that pain. That's my 2 cents on that.
Excellent. Yeah, it does. Sometimes it might be hard for people to hear and take in, but I think people need to hear it. I think it's time. It's past time. All right, let's dive into Twitter questions. This will be the last Twitter questions of the week for the season, so we're gonna make it extra special. This time we've got 4 awesome questions, and we are going to give away an entire box full of swag, right? So hoodies, t-shirt, mask, stickers, coasters, whatever the hell we got, we're going to send it this person's way. And yeah, it's our thanks for listening to our podcast, putting up with us. Especially when we run an SEO podcast that doesn't talk about traditional SEO topics all the time, but topics that we feel like are really, really important and should be talked about. We thank everybody for their support. So let's dive in. So our first question, and Azeem, I'm going to let you know, your role is to pick the winner. We've not clarified that with people, and then we've sprung that on people at the end, and they were like, "Oh, that makes me super uncomfortable." So as you're answering these questions, we want you to think about who deserves all the swag. Oh. Not a tent, the shit we all get. All right. So first question, and this is actually the person who DM'd us on the side to say, actually, swag is a tent in Australia. So first, thank you, Naomi. First question is from Naomi Fuller at Naomi_L_Fuller on Twitter. As an Australian SEO, before I ask my burning SEO/podcast question, I would like to know if this will be a single or double swag, or will it be king single swag? So that was the part referring to the tent, which I clearly did not get. But that was also the impetus for us giving away an entire box full of swag. In terms of her actual question, she asks, I first heard about Azeem Digital because of the John Mueller interview on the podcast. How much did that, or perhaps another interview, increase podcast subscriptions? And I'll add subscriptions and listens, because you can't subscribe on every podcast listening service.
Yeah. Oh, that is a great question. I have a personal rule, so it's very unlikely, unless you give me enough alcohol, that I will say, oh, this episode had 560 listens or whatever. But because she asked, I will tell you that that particular episode, it grew 103% on Spotify and 30% on Google. And within the first few days, it was heard in over 50 countries. So that's a short answer. The long answer is that came out in January. And as you both know, the longer content's out there, the more it gets listened to. Whenever I look at my listens, previous episodes will always still be in there. So that is regularly listened to. People really like John Mueller, and of course, why shouldn't they? He's a lovely guy, but it continues to listen. So in answer to the question, 103% on Spotify. For all anybody else knows, that could just be, from a short number to a short number, but 103% sounds sexy, and a handful of people listen to it on Google. So yeah, and in fact, the last thing that I'll say, oversharing, but look, we're all friends. I don't expect people to listen to every episode of my podcast. I know, and I'm sure you guys too, that on average, people will listen to 3 to 5 episodes before they decide if they want to stick around. So my job, and I'm sure your guys' job as well, is to make sure that if you're going to release 5 episodes, you got to make sure 3 are good. You fucked with this one because it's me, so you got to make sure your next 4 are bang on, basically. So yeah, that's it.
So our next question comes from Mike Ginley. And Mike, I just want to thank you. You've been one of our regular question askers, so thank you so much. It's at Mike Ginley SEO on Twitter. Any tips or things to avoid when starting and growing a podcast?
This is a great question. Thank you, Mike. And I'm going to try and avoid the cliche answers that you might see on Google. But for me, things to avoid: give yourself and your podcast enough time to get onto Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. Because if I remember correctly, this took up to a few days, and I was like, look, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to tell everyone I've got a podcast. Just get on there, because I know all of my friends listen on Apple Podcasts, or I am one of the rarities who will use Google Podcasts, for example. I need to get it on there. I don't want to say, hi everyone, I've got a podcast. By the way, you can't get it on the platform that you listen to yet, because that buzz will just die. That's one. Second one, inconsistency. Don't release one episode on a Wednesday, wait 6 weeks, and then release it again on a Tuesday if you're going to be out there weekly. Before you start, I would say, I'll sidestep in a minute, but before you start, I will say, have 4 to 5 episodes in the bank. If you're going to release weekly, fine, you've got a month's worth. If you're going to release monthly, you've got literally 4 months worth of content. Have those in the bank ready to go. So if anything happens, you've got a bank of content. The reason why I'm going to step to the side is because I am not practicing what I preach. I've only got 1 more episode left before I need to start recording more, which I will clarify in the answer to one of the other Twitter questions, why I've only got 1 more left. But that's the other thing. Equipment. I think I saw a tweet where you covered on SEO chat where you're talking about equipment. But yeah, you need to make sure you've got the right equipment, because having the right gear will save you so much time when you're editing. And I'm at the point now, I'm sure you guys are way ahead of me on this, where you can literally recognize something wrong as a sound wave. So you'll have to edit that, but every one of those you can recognize as a sound wave. Yeah. So don't scrimp or save on that. Invest early, and what you spend, you will make back in time, and you can't buy time. The last thing is, I think we touched on this earlier, starting sooner. Like, I wish I'd have started sooner. If you're thinking about starting a podcast, do it. I love going on and seeing people starting new podcasts, thinking, great, more content for me to enjoy. Like, get it out there. If you're thinking about it, just jump in and reach out to me or yourselves. I'm putting you out there now on the spot. Reach out to me or anyone in the industry. We can help you do it. More content is brilliant, rather than, oh no, like, don't do this because I'm in this space. Like, fuck that. There's enough for everyone to get at. So yeah, great question, and hopefully those help you out.
Yeah, I would say also, as a sidebar, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, but you're like you need to talk to somebody before you want to jump in, like hit us up, DM us, slide into our DMs. I'm happy to jump on a Zoom and just say, hey, here's things to think about. Here's A, B, C, D, E that you need to consider, and to offer encouragement as well. All right. Question number 3 comes from former guest Claire Carlisle at Claire Carlisle on Twitter. I'd like to ask Azeem, how is he so amazing? Hashtag be more Azeem Hart. So we all want to be more like Azeem. Azeem, how are you so amazing?
Claire is an absolutely lovely individual, really good friend of mine, lots of time for her. If you do not follow her on Twitter already, shame on you, because she is just brilliant and an absolute ray of light in the industry, and definitely one of the people who helps me shine for sure. So the answer to her question, ironically, is if people want to be more like me, they need to be more like Claire first. So that's the answer to my question.
That's a great answer. Excellent answer. All right, our last question, it's a good podcasting question too, comes from Andrew Cox Starkey. You know him on Twitter as @Optimizy. How much time does a good podcast take per episode, from planning, research, prep, doing the actual podcast, editing, etc.?
I don't know, Jake.
Yeah,
you do
Jeff,
all that work.
This is.
I just come in and talk.
Don't twist the knife, Jeff. Don't twist the knife.
So I think I've gone through this entire podcast without saying the 2 key killer words, which rhyme with Schmidt Schmipens, but I'm not going to say it. The answer for me, I would say, is incredible discipline. So the reason why I don't have much content is because my guest on my next podcast, I've been researching this person since August last year. And by researching, what I mean is consuming as much content as I can about this person. So I'm watching their talks, I'm reading their blog posts, anything that they are touching digitally, I want to be all over, because when we have a conversation, I want to make sure that I have enough background, enough preparation to not wing it. And if they're talking about things that I don't know about, I can quickly just go back and say, oh, I saw that you did a talk here and you touched on this. So there's not a specific answer. Planning and research can take months. If it's a brand new person who hasn't spoken in the past, what I do with them is I'll hop on to a Zoom or a Meet and just chat to them and say, look, tell me a bit about you. We're not recording. Let's get to know each other. That is something that I just do off the bat, like never gets recorded. Sometimes I have really valuable conversations not recording. For guests, it's usually a few months in advance. So I know who I'm going to speak to and put out in May and in August. So that, like I said, I'll write a list of people, put it out there, and then get a pitch form and speak to them. Editing, it's a fucking pain in the ass. So for me, I can't do it when I'm at work. My podcast is my own thing. I'm going to do it when I'm at home. So record in the evenings. Side note, I'm shit with time zones, and I learned the hard way when I spoke to Rand Fishkin. I don't know where this guy lives in America.
Seattle.
It's late
West
for
Coast.
me.
West Coast.
It's late. It is later. He was talking to me. It was must have been like 11 p.m. over here for me. And my day begins at like 3 a.m. So by 11 p.m. I was tired.
Let's wrap this up, Rand.
So yeah, editing, when I first started, it could take 8 to 12 hours. So like 3-4 nights a week. And then I thought, shit, I've got to get better at this. So I got better software basically. Now I think I can nail it in up to 4 hours. Like I said, I'm sad enough to know specific sound waves and just chop them out. So what I do, oversharing again, is just chop through stuff, go back, listen to it, make sure it sounds good. And then one thing that I didn't answer, apologies to Mike and his question before, is I had a great guest in the beginning. I'm not going to say which one because people are going to go out and look for it now, but the audio was shit. And I mean, shit.
Yeah.
But the content and the conversation was fantastic. And I had spent 3 weeks editing this podcast, and I didn't want to go back to the guest and say, please, can we re-record? Because you lose the quality of the conversation. And what this person said to me was, look, if you feel the content is good enough, just put it out there and let's see what happens. If people come back and say we didn't like it or we hate it, whatever. Luckily, nobody mentioned it. I think they must have had like a bracelet or something on. So every time they were talking, especially if you're somebody like me who's doing this, all you could hear was that jingling. And I thought, shit, I can't get this out. So a good clean run, I can record in half an hour, edit it in up to 4 hours. So in less than 5 hours, I could have an episode recorded, edited, live. Research could take a couple of months, but I do that in advance. Bank that.
Yeah.
That's it.
I would say for every hour that we record, add minimum 4 hours of time spent doing all of the other stuff, the scheduling, the outreach, the research, the editing, the promotion. Yeah, I mean, you got to promote your podcast as well, and that's my time, Jeff's time as well, to do the extended promotion and the recutting of episodes, and it's a lot. It's a big commitment.
This is going to be a bumper 4-hour episode for it. No, I'm joking.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Awesome. And I will say we had similar audio quality issues, with Jeff and I. The first episode of this season, I don't know if it was Jeff's equipment or it might have been my equipment, because I had made the change to sitting my microphone on my table instead of suspending it from a boom arm. And the audio quality was so bad that it was like there wasn't any editing. It was completely corrupted, and we had to re-record the episode. So sometimes that's just part of the game. We luckily with only one guest we've had a few kind of sketchy issues with audio here and there, but by and large, with the exception of one guest that I had where the audio was so corrupted that it was completely unusable. And this was towards the beginning. And I feel really, really awful for this guest, but I was afraid to go back to them, quite honestly. And then they reached out hey, was there something wrong with my episode? And the answer was no, except that the audio was completely unusable, and it's just never gotten back on the calendar, and I feel really horrible about that because I wasted their time. But hopefully someday, that particular guest, we can kind of reconnect, because that was one I felt pretty awful about. But audio's huge if you're running a podcast. All right, so let's pick a winner. So we've got Naomi with the John Mueller and podcast subscription increase question. We've got Mike with the things to avoid, Claire with the how can we be more like Azeem, and Andrew with the how much extra time should you plan for if you're running a podcast question. So who is our winner?
I am going to have massive splinters in my backside, but I'm going to approach this as diplomatically as I can. So Andrew, brilliant guy, great question, a lot of time for him, solid runner-up. Sorry, not on this occasion. Claire, lovely, fantastic person. I think the best gift that anybody could give would be her friendship. So sorry, Claire. And then it comes down to, for me, Mike and Naomi. Now, for me, you mentioned Mike is a regular listener. So on the strength of that, Mike will have more opportunities to win this swag, but purely because it was a great question and the confusion around swag, I'm going to have to give it to Naomi. So, yeah.
All right, Naomi.
Wow. Yeah, nice.
You win the swag, and we're not going to send you a tent. We're going to send you a box of Page 2 podcast shit we all get. So that's it. Jeff, take us home for season 3. That's we're coming to a close here. So Jeff, take us home.
Yeah, I'm about to cry, I think. Just kidding.
Don't get emotional on me now, Jeff.
Out of every episode, this would be the one, right? It's so we like to ask all our guests one final question, and that is, what words of advice would you give a person just getting into SEO?
Oh, that is a great question. For me, I would say, and this is a very Azeem answer, so hopefully you haven't had an answer like this before, but if you are just starting in the industry, I mentioned it earlier in the episode about the word good. Make that your new favorite word. And what I mean by that is if something goes bad or something goes wrong, respond and actually say the word good. Because when things go bad, there will be some good that comes from it. If you're starting out in your career, you didn't get the promotion that you want, good. You didn't win the client pitch, good. You got rejected from a job interview, good. All you've done is given yourself more time to get better. Prepared for a client meeting and it's got cancelled, good. Focus on another client. You've learned how to manage your time. Unexpected problems, good. Now you've got an opportunity to go back, figure out a solution. If things go bad for you in the beginning, don't beat yourself up and get frustrated. You can just say the word good. It means you're still in the game, you're still alive, you're still breathing, and there's still some energy and some fight left in you. So get up, dust off, recalibrate, re-engage, and go for those goals again. You can do it. Good.
Excellent advice to live by. Turn those negatives into positives. Make when you get lemons, make lemonade.
Yeah,
or limoncello.
Or limoncello.
For clarity, that those are not my words, but they are words that I live by. If you've ever heard of a guy called Jocko Willink, if you haven't, look him up.
Navy SEAL.
Love that guy.
Yeah,
I fucking love him. I absolutely love him. One day I'm going to meet that guy.
Is that why you wake up at 3 a.m?
Yeah, listen, between 3 and 5.
That's his whole thing.
Awake. Yeah, 100%. Like if I'm normal people, when you wake up in the middle of the night, you look at your watch, you go back to sleep. Me, that's it. I'm up full of caffeine and I'm in that gym 100%. I've been working out at like 3:16 in the morning, but then the downside is 7 p.m.
Yeah.
I'm done. But some of his stuff and the things that he's seen and been through, like, will shape any person. And those are his words about good. And I've applied that in my professional career, and it's taken me to places I never thought that I would get to the point where people, when they come to me and they say, "Oh, this has happened," good, that's it. People think I'm weird sometimes when I say that, but it's honestly, he's the man. But that's all I say on that. What a guy.
As long as you didn't say it depends. I think any answer would have sufficed. So Azeem, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Azeem Digital, AZEEM. My website is iamazeemdigital.com. I have recently started an Instagram. I've got like 4 friends on there. I don't know how many friends I've got, but it's literally just the same name. But I can't bore people on Twitter with boring gym motivational quotes. If you're really interested in shit like that, that's where you'll find me. So yeah, I do have LinkedIn, rarely use it. It's nonsense for me. Like,
you should get Kevin Indig on your podcast, on your weightlifting podcast.
He might be one of the people on that list, you know.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah. So make sure, guys and girls, everybody, if you have not tuned into Azeem's podcast, you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Play, pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts. It's the Azeem Digital Asks digital marketing podcast. So please do us a favor, go out and listen to his podcast. Excellent stuff. For everybody else, we will turn this episode around as we always do. Have a great week. This is the last episode for a while. This is the end. Jeff tried to kill me off, but he did not succeed. We will be back with season 4 with telling more amazing stories. That'll probably be at some point August, September. We need to recharge our batteries. We do appreciate all of the listeners. We got a ton of listens. We hit certain thresholds, I would say, that we set before the season for goals for listens. We thank every one of you for that. And we thank you for listening to our humble little podcast. We will be back in the fall. Thank you so much for listening to the Page 2 podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the show or listen to new episodes, visit us at page2podcast.fm. That's page, the number 2, podcast.fm. Our episodes are also available on a number of other platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Breaker, Deezer, Overcast, Castbox, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcasts. Additionally, you can also listen and watch our show on our YouTube channel or follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook. If you'd like to get in touch with us, contact us at thepage2podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, happy optimizing.